Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Coffin. Welcome to our 111th installment in the Torah portion of the week. We're holding by Parshas Shemos, which is the beginning of the book of Exodus. A lot of very interesting things in the Parsha. The fact that Pharaoh says that he doesn't remember Yosef. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. And all the good things that Yosef did. And then we have the Jewish people being enslaved by the Egyptians. God coming to Moshe, where he tells him that he should go and save the Jewish people, and etc. Moshe doesn't want to. Whatever, the whole story there. And that we're going to see a little bit. We're going to see a little bit what that, what all that means. So one verse I want to look at is in chapter 4, book of Exodus, verse 13. It says that he replied, meaning Moshe, please my Lord, send through whoever you will send. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't want to go. He says, I'm a man, I'm not a man of words. It says in verse 10, since yesterday, nor since the day before yesterday, nor since you first spoke to your servant, I am heavy of mouth, heavy of speech. So Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't want to go. Right? It's pretty clear that he doesn't want to go. And God is then going to chastise him and says, who makes a mouth for him, who makes open, one dumb, one deaf, sighted, blind, all that, right? So he says, don't worry, I'll speak to you, you tell Aaron, and Aaron will tell, Pharaoh what I want to tell him. So, whatever, it's an interesting thing that God commands him, and he doesn't want to go. So, says Mori Varebi Arav Agon Moshe Moshlita, should be well, brings down in his book Chochmah V'Daz, and he says this is a tremendous wonder, because Moshe Rabbeinu hears explicitly from the mouth of God, whatever that means, however Moshe heard God speak. And what does God want him to do? God wants to send him as his messenger, and he should go tell Pharaoh he wants that the Jewish people should come out, he should let them go. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, I don't want to go. Right? He pushes God aside, and he says, I don't want to go. So Rebbe brings down, he said it was common that Rav Chaim Brisker, right, famous Rav Chaim Brisker, that said that, or it was common for him to say that anybody who has doubts in emunah, anyone who has doubts in belief in God, he said the reality is, if they have doubts, it means they don't believe at all. Right? They don't believe in God at all. Right? Because you can have people that have doubts in truth, that, God runs the world, there's divine providence, on each person. A person could, maybe have a doubt about that. But having a doubt whether that to serve God, or whether that what does God want from us, maybe does hear and see, maybe does understand what's going on. But if he has these type of doubts, then Reb Chaim says that he's not considered a believer. Right? He's got fundamental doubts. Because someone who truly believes under all circumstances. Right? Regardless of what trials and tribulations that they go through, however difficult life is, they still believe. Right? They don't question, this isn't fair, why is this happening to me? All these different things. Right? They believe under all circumstances. So if somebody believes in divine providence on an individual, right? That's clear that he has full belief. So let's break this down. Let's just break this down for a second. That what did Rav Chaim Brisker say? Rav Chaim Brisker said anyone who has any doubts in emunah and belief in God and how He runs the world, so he's not a believer at all. It's not like he's a partial believer, right? He doesn't believe. He doesn't believe that God has the ability to run the world, that God is in charge of everything, that we do. Obviously, we have free will, and our free will may be limited, but at the same time, He gives us the ability, to make choices. So someone who has doubts in that, right, according to this, is not a believer. On the other hand, a person, whatever they go through, they understand it's based on what God wants for them. It's based on, transgressions that they may do, certainly as well. And they understand that God runs the world. They don't have any question whether to serve Him, whether not to serve Him. Right? It's that's pretty clear. Right? So that is someone who believes. Right? Or according to Rav Chaim Brisker, who's considered a believer. Now, let's take it a little bit further, right? And then we'll come back to this. Maybe also points out that Rabbi Cheskel Levenstein, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, Cheskel Levenstein was the mashgiach, the spiritual advisor in the Mir Yeshiva, and here in Bnei Brak in Panovich. The Panovich Yeshiva brings down the Rambam, and the Rambam says that someone who believes in God, right? Someone who believes in Him through miracles, right? They see miracles, they see wonders, they say, yeah, this must be God's working, I'm going to believe in Him. So what happens? If someone only believes because of the miracles and the wonders that they see, his heart is full of nothingness. Right? His heart's kind of problematic, right? Because he's only believing because of what he sees. Right? Because it could be, maybe he thinks that this miracle happens through kishuv, through sorcery. Right? And that's what God did on Mount Sinai. Right? That our eyes saw Him. Right? But maybe it was done through sorcery. So God promised to Moshe, as we'll see later, chapter 19, verse 9, that what happened to them, they believed with a full heart what they saw, what they heard. Right? It wasn't any tricks, wasn't sorcery. Right? They believed in exactly what they saw. So now he says we get a glimpse and understand what Moshe Rabbeinu claimed over here, that Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't want to go. Right? He doesn't want to go. Because the reality is, what is he going to do? He's going to show, Moshe Rabbeinu is going to do these tricks, right? He's going to do the stick trick, right? He's going to do a few other things to show that he's the real deal and God is sending him, right? He's going to do these wonders. But if he didn't do that, right? Or let's say better, even through that, that's not clear emunah. That's not full emunah for him to be sent. And the reason is because he's doing wonders. God's doing wonders through him. And, that's not full proof over here. Right? Again, maybe it's sorcery, maybe it's other things, right? So Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to go on that premise. But rather, if God would reveal Himself, where people could feel God's presence, so then that would be something different. So this opens pretty much a whole can of worms, about belief in God. How strong does a Jew's belief in God have to be? Well, there's an obligation to believe in God because the Torah says, what's the proof that God exists? The Torah says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, right? Exodus chapter 20. God says, I am the Lord your God. Why? Because I took you out of the house of bondage. Right? So God is telling us we have to believe in Him because He intervenes in history. Now that belief is not the Christian belief of, I believe, right? The Christian belief is based on faith. This is based on knowledge. There are many proofs based on knowledge and, that we can believe in God and how we know God exists. It's not really the purpose of this. I just want to speak, about different aspects, different aspects of belief in God and what, and what belief is in general, to see where, we may be holding or what the Jewish people need to do. So the point here is the fact that, a person could grow up their whole lives, as an Orthodox Jew, go to synagogue, 3 times a day, learn, many years, after they're married and all that, and still their belief in God is pretty wishy-washy. In other words, they're doing what they're doing because, it could be any number of reasons. One reason could be they don't want to fry in hell forever. All right, so they'll put up they'll go through the motions, and by going through the motions, okay, they'll raise a family, they'll have the holidays, they'll do all these different things, but really, deep down inside, there's nothing there. There may be exterior motives of why they're doing what they're doing. Not necessarily because 100% it's entrenched in them. It comes along Rav Chaim Brisker. And Rav Chaim Brisker says, you have doubts? You're not a believer. Right? You're totally not a believer. Now, certainly in the States, I know there's over the years, over the last number of years, over the last 10, 15 years, there's been a major push of going into schools and speaking to kids, about, major questions in Judaism. Suffering, one major question. How do we know God exists? Belief in God, right? Whatever, major things that, if kids ask in a class, the teachers get flustered, A, because maybe they don't really know the answer themselves, or B, they're worried this will open up a whole can of worms, and this person's really a heretic. It's going to cause other people to go astray, right? It's going to cause classmates potentially to go astray, so we don't speak about these, these fundamental issues. So there's an organization, that's been doing exactly this, giving kids the background of what they may not have gotten, and gives them a forum to be able to ask these questions. And these are basic questions that every Jew has to know, right? They have to believe it, right? These are part of the 13 principles of faith. Belief in God. God is unique. God is all-powerful. He's got the ability to reward and punish. He knows the thoughts of man. I mean, these are pretty important things. So if a Jew, let's say better, if a Jew does not believe in these 13 principles, he's not a Jew. Right? Well, that's pretty harsh. How many of us really believe 100%? There are different levels of belief as well. Right? But let's make clear that, there are a lot of answers to these questions. These are not new questions. It's not like, someone came up 3,000 years later, now I understand, I got this question no one ever thought of. Right? We're not going to think of questions no one's ever thought of. All right, the questions exist. All right, there have been major, philosophical works, that have answered a lot of these questions. Keep in mind the Rambam, Maimonides himself, wrote a book called the Moreh Nevuchim, the Guide for the Perplexed. Wrote it in Arabic, that was translated into Hebrew, that's translated into English. Very difficult book to go through, not just based on the translation, but the fact that it's a very philosophical book as well. So the language isn't easy. But he wrote this book because there were tens of thousands of Jews going astray based on secular philosophy, right? The secular philosophy of Plato, Aristotle. So he wrote this book in order to answer up, quote unquote, contradictions of what Aristotle and Plato said, and which convinced many Jews to go astray. So, the Rambam understood in his day that was certainly needed. Now today, that book's really obsolete, right? Not so many people learn it because people are not going astray because of philosophy. Are there questions that people have that could cause them, to think and say, oh, the Torah can't be true because what do you do with the age of the dinosaurs, how old the world is, science and Torah, right? That's a question probably most people aren't even interested in, right? But they'll throw that out there. It's like, oh, if the Torah's really true, why do scientists say the world's a billion years old and you only hold it's 5,000 years old? Right? So there are answers to these questions. That's really the point here. We're not saying don't ask the question. Right? They're people, they're thinkers. I wouldn't necessarily call them, big time philosophers, but they have this question, maybe a nagging question, but they're afraid to ask it because they're afraid, the teacher's going to think they're heretics, they're going to bring other kids to go astray, but these questions need to be answered, right? Kids need today, deeper answers, not the standard answers that, if a person doesn't have a problem in faith, belief in God, so fine. They don't need so many, answers like this or delving into it as much. They believe 100%. They don't have any issues, right? But someone who does have an issue, right? I don't think there's any negativity, by explaining if it can be done, right? If they can't do it, they should go to other people who can do it, or go through books that explain it, that discuss the deeper meanings of why we do what we do. If a person would go through the book Chovos Levavos, right, the book Duties of the Heart by the Rabbeinu Bachai, so he set out to write the book for one very simple reason, that he felt that any book that he saw from previous generations on the mitzvahs and why we do the mitzvahs was severely lacking. Right? Was severely lacking in a deeper understanding of what our purpose in this world is, deep in our hearts, not just doing the mitzvah. Right? And we're not talking about Kabbalah either. Right? We're talking about understanding what I'm doing. In other words, you need the inner dimension of the heart, to really fathom what's going on before you can do the mitzvah. So before a person would shake his lulav, or make a blessing over food, whatever it is. So what's the blessing you make? Right? In this case, you say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu Melech Haolam. So Brei Priya Eitz, right? You make a blessing and say, Brei Priya Eitz, that God created the fruit of the tree. Make the Brei Priya Eitz on an orange, right? Here's our orange. Makes the Brei Priya Eitz on the orange, and he starts to eat. Now, right before he makes the blessing, what he really should do is think about what he's doing. You're going to say, what do you mean, what is he doing? He's hungry, wants to eat an orange, right? He's not going to eat, some cake or a cookie or whatever. He wants to be a little more healthy. So what's he going to do? He's going to eat an orange, pretty clear. So when he eats his orange, before he eats the orange, let him think, a little bit about what he's doing. Because the blessing they're going to make is, blessed are you, or God is the source of all blessing, and he created the world, and he created the fruit of the tree. So it's brought down if you don't mention God's name, or you don't mention that He's king of the world. If you mention one without the other, it's not a blessing. It's nothing. It's absolutely zero. So therefore, a person should think a split second and say, I'm about to eat this orange, but I have to give thanks to my Creator. He's the one that created it. His name is God, and He created the world. Right? Again, you don't need Kabbalistic intention. And if I didn't even have proper intention, I still fulfilled my obligation. Because we hold today people are on such a weak level that mitzvahs ain't shrichas kavanah. That mitzvahs really don't need intention. Right? It's not that we shouldn't try and have intention, but we're on such a weak level, right? So what are we supposed to do? Right? If we didn't have intention, I have to go back and say the blessing again and say it again. We don't have intention in general. I'm just saying that if a person would put in their heart and they would think about what they're doing and they understand that God runs the world and that God's in charge and the fact that He runs everything, is not going to make the blessing different. Isn't it going to make my awareness that much greater? Of course. Problem is, we're so busy chasing our tails, as the Ramchal says in Mesilas Yesharim. The Ramchal says in Path of the Just that one of the things the evil inclination does is it makes us so busy we don't have time to think. It makes our lives much more difficult. So Pharaoh himself, this week's Parsha, works them tremendously hard. Why? So they can't think. Can't make a plan to rebel. It's going to work them to death. They won't be able to do anything else. So based on that, he's going to be successful. They're not going to have a chance to think. So in today's day and age, even though there are many things we do today that are much easier than in our grandparents' generation, our great-grandparents' generation, totally different world, right? Still, we got all this free time because we're not, doing laundry, for instance, like it was a whole day chore. Most people lived in agricultural societies. They had to grow the crops, do these other things. You had to barter, selling one thing for something else. I mean, this took up plenty of time. So today it's very easy. Right? It's very easy. Go into the supermarket, buy stuff, you don't have to do anything. Right? Washing clothes, put the clothes in, put a little bit of soap in, press the button, it's done. Right? You don't have to do anything. Yeah, life is much easier. Even though life is much easier, do we have these great thinkers? Do we have these thousands of people, millions of people coming back to Torah, whether you're a Jew or a non-Jew? You don't have it. One possible reason is, as we mentioned, everything's easy. You don't have to think. You don't have to work hard, like we used to. You don't have as much appreciation. You don't have any appreciation because everything's there. When do we start to get the appreciation? You walk into a store, it doesn't have your favorite candy bar, and you start jumping up and down. Right? That's how weak we are today. I'm not even going to go down that path. In general, the harder things are, and the more work we have to put in, we're not going to waste time. You don't have time to waste. Today, that's all people do is waste time. Again, it doesn't matter if a person's working hard and they're busy and this and that. I think people would be very surprised, if they would clock in and clock out every day. Time that they're not working, etc. What are they doing in the rest of their time? What are they doing in their spare time? So, what they're doing in their spare time is they're attached to some handheld device. That's pretty much what they're doing. Whether they're texting, whether they're watching things, whatever it is, they're basically wasting time. Right? So, the fact that we have a lot more free time on our hands allows us to tap into things probably shouldn't tap into. Negative things. So, we live in a very complex world. Right? We see a lot of things in front of us don't make any sense. Right? Don't make any logical sense. So, that could call into question our belief in God. Our belief in God is much stronger when jobs are going well, we're making money, we're not lacking for very much. Things are great. When we have difficulties, that is where the test is of a person's belief. If the belief is strong across the board, doesn't matter. Whatever they're going to go through, their belief is going to stay intact. If there are doubts, even when things are going good, but things go bad, or things are difficult, God, why are you doing this to me? That's when belief goes out the window. So belief, is something that definitely needs to be strengthened, right? Something that needs to be worked on. And if we have questions, about these big issues, we should look into it. Doesn't mean there are no answers, right? There are answers, and a person's not a heretic because he wants an answer, right? It could be a heretic for other reasons, right? But not because they have a general, they have a genuine question, and if a child's growing up, and they go through years of school and these questions don't get answered, then what's the child going to think? There are no answers. Right? They're going to think there are no answers. So what you have is, you have people growing up, and when they're in their 20s and 30s, their belief will be like a 5-year-old because it's never been nurtured, never been worked on. Right? They're not getting what they need to get. And again, a lot of times, people are going to ask questions, especially children. They're going to ask questions for the sole reason they want an answer. They're not asking to be a heretic. They're not asking so they can answer themselves up why they want to do this, that, and the other thing that's wrong. They want an answer because they want an answer. They want to know what the answer is. They're not going to cause other people, other kids to go astray. And, we're over-analyzing, right? Many people over-analyze. They don't look at the basic idea, right? And that basic idea is they want an answer. They want to understand to the best of their ability, why is it, how do I know that God exists? What kind of logical proof can we give to show that God exists? Has anyone, within Torah sources ever spoken about it? Sure have. That's all right. A person would have to look around, look at the right books, in order to get the answers. The answers are there. But make no mistake, if a child gets pushed off, and they're told, oh, we don't ask those questions, or they're looked at as a heretic and, etc., what's it going to do for the child? It's going to kill them. It's everyone according to their own level, but what can happen is they can grow up, become older, been keeping Torah mitzvahs for years and years, but inside of them, they don't really understand a lot of what they do. And if a person doesn't understand what they do, essentially either you're going to be going through the motions, or you're going to feel very empty. You're going to feel extremely empty. And kids pick up on that also. Kids will see that. So that's not a good educational, a good educational device, for the sake of our kids, as well. So we have to work on our belief in God. Every time we say a blessing, every time we keep Shabbos, every time whatever mitzvah we do, we strengthen the soul. But a person cannot just go through the motions. If a person just goes through the motions, that's all they're doing. Right? That's not going to be significant, in their development. in their Torah development. They're not going to grow because you got this nagging thing, you got this emptiness. You got this emptiness inside. So, a person shouldn't just study philosophy either, right? In other words, there's still actions, still things we have to do, right? Because we have an obligation to serve God regardless. Because the person will say, well, if I understood things better, I'll serve, I'll do these mitzvahs. You gotta do the mitzvahs anyway, right? However much you understand. It's not about philosophy. It's about action. But at the same time, you gotta understand what you're doing, to the best of your ability. So, comes along Rav Chaim Brisker. So Rav Chaim Brisker over here says, you don't believe, you have doubts. God runs the world, every aspect of it. You have doubts. Well, you know what? That means you don't believe at all. Right? Though it sounds a little bit harsh. And the reality is, it is harsh because someone who has doubts, it means you don't think God runs the world. It means you don't think God's in charge. Because they know I have a doubt. That's exactly what it is. Right? So some people will use this as a crutch and say, well, I'm not 100% sure until I know for sure, then I'll do it. Right? But again, Judaism is all about doing things even if you don't understand 100%. Doesn't mean you don't have to look into it. Doesn't mean you don't have to try and understand it. But to the best of your ability, right, you got to live it. So you could go through the motions, but that's going to be a disaster for yourself and for people around you, unless you can hide it very well. Most people, they're going to start slacking in observance, right? That'll be a dead giveaway. Right? Because they have some issue, it bothers them. And we're not saying these aren't legitimate questions. A person goes through a tragedy, something happens, can shake a person up 100%. At the same time, if a person truly believes, we don't have questions. There are no questions. Something happens, someone causes someone damage. Let's give an example. So we'll go through the Torah perspective. Someone caused someone damage. Now, is that person liable? Yeah. Person's liable. Now, in theory, I should say you're right. This person did something very not nice, caused me damage. But guess what? He is a messenger. God just used this person as a messenger to do what he did. So you're going to say, well, if we use him as a messenger, then why should that person be punished? Because he caused damage. He's got free will. He didn't have to be the one to do it, but he did it. All right, so you have to take responsibility for your actions. But at the same time, God's the one who sent him. So when a person is bemoaning the fact that they were damaged and this happened and that happened, how could this person have done it? And look how cruel. And yeah, although all that is true, but at the same time, he was sent in your direction. So a person can't look at that and say, well, I had nothing to do with it. It was my bad luck. No such thing as luck in this world. Everything's exact. God knows exactly what he's doing. To each person, each second, right? Everyone's getting exactly what they deserve, measure for measure. So there is no chance. There are no, chance happenings, which is what Amalek, Yimach Shemam v'zichram, may their name be blotted out and they should rot, whoever Amalek is today. That's what they brought to the world. They brought doubt to the world. Doubt in all existence. Meaning that, who says there's a God? And even if there is a God, who says he runs the world? He's in charge. Stuff happens. That's their motto. Right? And that has destroyed tens of thousands, of Jews because they buy into that philosophy. Because at the end of the day, if God's controlling everything and we believe God is all good, so then why do people have a hard time? Why do they suffer? Right? It's a legitimate question also. Not a new question. So the reality is, we don't understand what we go through, how we go through it. There are times that we transgress the 614th commandment of don't be stupid, right? That we've done. That probably will continue to do. But at the same time, God is putting you in certain situations because of what we've done. Or because of what, our soul might have done, in a previous existence, or whatever the case is. But he's the one pulling the strings. So the question is, either we believe that, or we don't believe that. If we believe it 100%, and we live it, okay, then a person's a believer. If a person has a doubt, maybe this happened just because of chance, right? But everything else he believes, says with Chaim Brisker, you are not a believer. You're not a believer 100%, which makes you not a believer, period. Don't pass go, don't collect 200. Because you're coming to deny something that is essential. It's as if you're saying, well, the exodus from Egypt, yeah, I believe it happened, but, I have doubts whether God runs the world entirely or not. Well, that's how we know God intervenes in history, right? Because the first of the 10 commandments that God took us out of Egypt is showing belief in God, right? How do I know God exists? Because he took me out of Egypt. He intervenes in history. Could have just said, I believe in God because he ended up creating the world. He created the world. Only problem is nobody was there to witness it. No one's there to witness it. Not a good enough proof to believe in God. But we have 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60, not including women and children, saw God face to face, Mount Sinai. Right? 3 million people, give or take. 3 million people that heard God say, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. And they witnessed the ones that came out of Egypt, and even the ones that didn't come out of Egypt, they witnessed the miracles. So if they witnessed the miracles, doesn't that show God intervenes? It should, because the miracles go against nature. They're above nature. So therefore, belief in God has to be based on the fact that he intervenes in history. Where do I see he intervenes in history? Pretty clear by the Jews coming out of Mount Sinai. Coming out of Egypt and getting the Torah Mount Sinai. That's how we know God intervenes in history. We also know, as the Torah tells us clear, there's reward and punishment. Right? The Egyptians here get punished. God tells Abraham, your nation, your progeny are going to go into the land not theirs. They're going to suffer. So, it doesn't say who's going to make them do it. The Egyptians come and do it. So the Rambam asks, so if God takes away Pharaoh's free will, why is he punished? Because he got punished. He went beyond what he should have done. And then God says, okay, I'm going to nail him now. I'm going to take away his free will. The Egyptians, were they the ones that had to enslave the Jewish people? No, they ended up doing it. So they're punished. The Torah does not say the Egyptians are going to be the one to do this, and they're just fulfilling predestination. This is what they were supposed to do. And God knows that they were going to do it anyway. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that they don't get punished. Right? I just made a video on Tanakh Talk. Take a look at Tanakh Talk on YouTube. Episode number 32 of predestination. Right? If God knows what I'm going to do anyway, and I act on it, do I get punished? The answer is yeah. Why do you get punished? Because you did the action. So what if God knows you're going to do it? You still have to do it. You're not a robot. Right? So you have to see over there what we spoke about. So these are pretty big concepts. A person doesn't believe in them, has doubts. He's not a believer. Now you might say, well, doesn't everybody have doubts? At some level? And the answer is, someone who truly believes is not going to have doubts. If they truly believe, it doesn't matter what happens to them. They believe 100% this is orchestrated from above. It's payback for what something they might have done, or whatever the case is. They have to do tshuva, they have to repent, and then suffering will go away. Now, suffering could last a long time. It could last years. Right? Doesn't matter. Person's belief has to be rock solid. There could be times where that belief may be shaken a little bit. So we have to be careful. Regardless of what happens, we still have to be strong. And that strength has to carry us through. Because if it doesn't, and there's a chink in the armor, which means that, there's going to be, thoughts of like what's going on here, etc., which may take God out of the picture, which will come into question our belief in Him. So, Rav Cheskel Levenstein says that Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't want to go because how he's going to prove that God of their people is going to take them out of Egypt through Moshe. Because Moshe is going to do these tricks, these wonders. But see, Moshe Rabbeinu says, maybe that's not enough. Maybe if I do these wonders, people may think it's from sorcery. People may not think it's necessarily from God Himself. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu says, I don't want to go. Because the belief in God is not going to be complete. It's not going to be whole. If it's not going to be whole, then there's a problem. There's an absolute problem. Because we saw before, if that belief in God is not crystal clear, which would mean by process of deduction that if it's not clear, I may have a doubt. If you have a doubt, then you're not a believer. And again, the scoffer inside us, or inside others, maybe not us, would say, come on, does someone really believe 100%? Remember that time this happened, that happened? Did you really believe God's the one pulling the strings? God's the one in charge? So hopefully our answer is going to be 100%. Right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's easy to deal with. Whatever we have to deal with. But a person has to be careful. Because when we let these doubts creep in, any doubts, it's going to be almost like a stack of dominoes. Just get, one thing get knocked off, not second thing, a third thing. It's going to make a person's resolve that much weaker. It's going to make their mitzvah observance that much weaker. But it doesn't mean that we don't have, that we don't have questions. Questions are legitimate. I get this question a lot from former Christians, and they say, am I allowed to ask questions? And the answer is, you're definitely allowed to ask questions. Because in the church, you're not allowed to ask questions because the church doesn't have answers. And you just have to have faith. But see, our faith is based on knowledge. They're not just based on I believe. Right? So we love questions. I mean, there are difficult questions. There are definite, legitimate questions. And they're hard. But even if they're hard, it doesn't mean there aren't answers. It doesn't mean we don't necessarily have to, not look for answers. Right? There are answers out there. People deserve answers to their questions. At the same time, we have to respect the answers. Kids say, I wouldn't believe in that. Right? There are plenty of people just scoff at some of these answers. It's like, oh, that's what the rabbis tell you? That's what you really believe? You think it's really true? There's a disease that's been around for a long time, right? And that disease is called scoffing and mocking, right? In today's generation, even previous generations, right? The person who scoffs or makes fun the most, right? They're the ones that are most, well liked. You don't take anything seriously. Everything you make fun of. Everything you make fun of, where are you going to see the truth? You'll never see the truth. You're not interested in the truth. That's why there are many places where it says to stay away from scoffers, right? Because they're going to have a negative influence on you. They're going to give you, negative feedback. And that's bad. Because that's going to take God out of the picture. It's going to be, they're going to belittle your beliefs, whatever they may be. So a person has to have a very strong resolve, and that's why the commentaries tell us, this is one of the worst character traits to have, and even if you don't have it, you stay away from people that do, because all that does is makes everything very cynical, and therefore people aren't going to keep whatever they need to keep, because they're just going to get beaten down. And once they're beaten down enough, then they're not going to want to, they're not going to want to look into things. They're not going to want to fight for their beliefs and all that, right? So that the influence is tremendously negative. They might say, well, I got people like that in my own family. Yeah, it could be. So you got to be careful, right? You got to be careful what you talk to them about, if you talk to them. Like, these are serious things. They'll say, oh, what's the matter? You can't speak to me because I may convince you of other things, or I have spiritual cooties. At the end of the day, we're not here for that long. Right? King David says, you're here for 70 years. If you have strength, you're here 80 years. That's it. Right? We're not here for a very long time. Don't waste it. Right? Don't waste it with stupid things. Don't waste it hanging around with people that are going to lead you the wrong path, trying to convince you, up is down and down is up and all that. You stay away because the influence is bad. And it's going to negatively affect you, negatively affect your service to God. And that's what we're doing in this world, is draw ourselves closer and to make sure that our belief in Him is so strong that it doesn't matter. Whatever happens, that, we're still going to have that strength. We're still going to have that belief in Him. So I want to remind people I have conversion classes and no-hide classes. No-hide classes aren't live, but I have conversion no-hide classes. You can take a look at my Facebook fan page, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism, or orthodoxconversion.com. It's my blog. I also usually do 2 question and answer sessions a week. One is Tuesday, 10 in the morning, New York time. One is Thursday, 9 o'clock night time. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, New York time. Also, Tuesday nights, I give a class, Duties of the Heart, Chovos Levavos, by the Rabbeinu Bachai, and that meets for about an hour or so. We're still in the middle of the introduction. I also have a class that's not live on Mesilas Yesharim, Path of the Just by the Ramchal, and I have a Torah portion of the week class that anyone can come to that has nothing to do with conversion. It's every Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, New York time, for 2 hours. And this is the 6th year we've been doing it. And we're holding by Book of Leviticus, chapter 1, verse 2. Anyone wants to contact me, Rabbi Chaim Kaufman at gmail.com. RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN at gmail.com. Wishing everyone a great Shabbos.